Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Sprague, co-founder and CEO of Kinship. For those of you who haven't heard of Kinship before, we're a cloud solution for teams working in Revit that provides content management, project tracking, and analytics. Our customers are mostly architects and engineers, although we do have some contractors, vertically integrated firms, and even BIM consultancies using it as well. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the journey we've been on as an AEC software company over the last 10 years or so, from when we started as 3 founders building a tool to solve our own problem, all the way up until today, where Kinship is used by hundreds of AEC firms and thousands of users every day all around the world. I'm going to pull back the curtain on some of the many ups and downs that we've gone through at Kinship in the hopes that you'll find some valuable lessons, ideas, and takeaways that you can apply in your own work. So let's get into it. Like so many other startups, we started out working on something different and with a different name. We called ourselves Endecan, and we began our life in AEC tech as a company focused on Revit content creation. Jose Fondos, our founder, had seen Revit a few years earlier. He saw that it was going to be the future of BIM design and that it all rested on content. He thought people are going to need lots of Revit content, so let's create it for them. And so we did, but it turned out to be a tough business. There was no standard for what people thought was good content. There was definitely no standard for what people thought good content should cost. It took a lot of time and effort to train people to create quality Revit content, and customer orders were very inconsistent. We tried figuring out a way to make it more of a recurring revenue business, but couldn't get it to work. So by 2011, we were seriously considering whether it was even worth it to keep going. But something interesting happened during those first few years. At a certain point, we had so many projects with so much content that we realized we needed a system for managing it. And being tech people, we wanted to build a proper system for it, an application that was designed to manage, find, and distribute Revit content. And so we built that for ourselves. At first, it was just an internal asset that would help us be more effective and efficient, but then we noticed customers kept asking us if we had any recommendations for how they could store, organize, and manage the content we were making for them. So we had that proverbial aha moment. What if we took the tool we built for ourselves and turned it into something that AEC firms could use to manage their own content? So what if we pivoted? Now, it was hardly an overnight transition from that aha moment to launching Kinship as a content management solution. There was still a lot of work to do to turn our internal tool into a commercial product. Meanwhile, we were 3 founders with bills to pay, 2 of us with families to support and kids to raise. So we had to take other jobs while we kept chipping away at it as a side project. But in 2015, Jose ended up working at Bureau Happold Engineering in a BIM role. And while he was there, he showed people what we've been working on with Kinship. Their team was getting heavily into Revit, and Jose asked if they'd be interested in trying it. So long story short, they ended up using Kinship within their UK MEP team. And in exchange for getting access to a cool new tool, they gave us feedback on what worked well, what didn't, and what else they would like to have in the product. And after about a year of that, we felt Kinship was a commercial ready tool, and Bureau Happold was ready to sign up as our first paying customer. So we started our launch by bringing Kinship to close contacts that we had in the UK market. And the 2 most significant ones were BDP and Foster & Partners. Each of those unfolded quite differently and taught us different things. I still remember our demo meeting with BDP very vividly. We went up to Manchester to give them an in-person presentation. At the time, we had put what I considered an insanely high price on Kinship, but we went up there, we did the demo, and they seemed really interested. Then they asked us what the price would be for them to use it across, their whole team. And when we told them, it was literal sticker shock. The room went totally quiet. And they eventually said something like, well, this might be the Ferrari of content management, but maybe we only need the Toyota. So when we left the meeting, I was pretty dejected. I was very upset about the pricing and thought that had just cost us the opportunity. But Jose was excited. He said, did you see how much they liked it? And they didn't say no, really. So why don't we get back to them and work out a deal? And so that's what I did. Took a phone call, we worked out a price agreeable to both sides, and from there we were able to move forward. Meanwhile, with Foster & Partners, there we had a strong internal champion advocating for Kinship, but we still had to go through a whole gauntlet of reviews: IT security, user testing, procurement. Pricing was also still an issue that needed to be negotiated. It took months to get through everything. There were definitely moments where we thought we might not make it, but in the end, we ended up with a 3-year enterprise contract for a substantial sum. It was one that came with a number of caveats and obligations that, looking back, we would have rather avoided. Still, by the end of 2017, we had 6 paying customers and enough money in the bank to start growing our team. Here started off with us riding high on the back of our 3-year deal with F&P, and yet it ended in near disaster. So what happened in between? Simply put, we grew too fast. We hired too many people, and we weren't able to turn those hires into more revenue. That was because, first of all, we didn't have a clear and focused direction for the product. We worked on too many things at once, things that were too large scale, things that were not directly tied to customer requests or feedback. And second of all, it turned out that our pricing was actually way too high. So when we were just selling to close contacts who we had good relationships with already, that was a hurdle that could be overcome. But now, as we tried to sell to firms and contacts that we had no relationship with, we found ourselves having, new trials where the customer seemed to love the product, but eventually they would go quiet about next steps. And then only weeks or even months later, we would finally hear that the price was just too high. So our theory had been that if somebody loved the product, they would tell us that the price was too high and ask what we could do about it. The reality was different. People are very busy. You're not their highest priority. And more often than not, they assume you tell them is the price they'll have to pay. So we had been looking at sales, the sales process as if they were maybe buying a house or a car, because for us, it was that significant. But for the customer, it was more like maybe buying a phone or a home appliance, where you walk into the store, you see the price, you think maybe there could be a small discount, but pretty much the price is the price. So after 9 months of a high burn rate and virtually no sales, we found ourselves dangerously close to running out of money. Some hard decisions had to be made in order to keep the company going. So what did we do to recover? In short, we downsized and restructured a bit. So Jose had to take another job to make money. I stepped in as CEO. We reduced our product team to just 2 developers. I had to go without a salary for 6 months and with a fairly minimal one for a while after that. But we just focused on making sales. And I had never done sales before. I thought I would be a terrible salesperson. But I found out that, because I knew we had a unique and high quality solution, I really believed in it and I knew it inside and out, I could sell it. I also took a hard look at our sales model. So I did cut our price significantly. I took it down to basically a fraction of what Revit itself would cost somebody, something around 10% of a Revit license cost, because I thought that made sense as a tool that was complementary to Revit. And I also streamlined our sales process. So we had made running a trial of the product too burdensome. We had a bunch of requirements and standards we insisted on to ensure what we felt would be a high quality trial experience. But again, people are busy, they have other priorities, they have internal bottlenecks around scheduling and resources. So instead, I turned our requirements into recommendations, but would just let people try it however they wanted or were able to, and put our trust in the product itself and our support to close the sale. Meanwhile, on the product side, we focused our development and roadmap around customer feedback. So first, we narrowed in on the needs of architecture and engineering firms as our primary clients. We listened to what existing customers were saying. We listened to the requests that we got from prospective customers, and we looked at what could be easily built on top of what we already had. And we also stopped aiming for perfection and focused more on just shipping. The result was that by the end of 2019, we doubled our annual revenue and we were back on solid footing. So we now had an efficient, repeatable sales model, giving us positive cash flow and healthy growth. We were ready to start growing the team again. This time we would do it slower and smarter. The first thing I did was bring Jose back full time as our head of product. He really held the soul of the product in terms of creative vision. And I think you need that living and breathing inside of the company. The second thing I did was hire a customer success manager. We now had a consistently growing customer base. And I realized if we didn't take good care of the customers we already had, it wouldn't matter how many new ones we would get. Customers would end up leaving and we'd just be paddling hard to stay in place. We also put in place our first proper systems for technical support requests, feature requests, trainings, and customer meetings. And finally, we also opened ourselves up to sales partners. We'd previously been skeptical of that because we wanted to have direct relationships with all of our customers, but I felt the global market was just much bigger than we could cover ourselves, and we were holding ourselves back out of some idealism. And importantly, we found a couple of partners where we felt a really strong alignment on values and approach to working with customers. And so those partnerships allowed us to start making significant inroads in the Australian and US markets, where before we had a minimal presence. So by 2022, we were on our way to reaching 100 customers, having had only about 20 a few years prior. That was pretty good growth, but things did start to get stretched. The product was being used in more ways and more heavily than ever before. This led to more bug reports and feature requests than we were used to. Our AWS infrastructure was getting hammered to the point where it was routinely affecting performance. And meanwhile, sales weren't slowing down, so these problems were only getting worse. Whereas after our initial launch, we made the mistake of growing too fast. I would say this time we probably grew too slowly. That said, it's much, much easier to correct the mistake of growing too slowly. We just hired more developers. We focused on cleaning up and refactoring code, revising our AWS infrastructure, clearing bugs as much as possible. And eventually the bug report slowed down, performance issues went away, the dust settled, and we could get back to building. Now, throughout our whole history, we've been a fully bootstrapped company. We've never taken any outside investment. We did try a few times, but honestly, we never tried hard enough or long enough to really succeed with that, because as the business kept growing organically, we could always self-finance our next moves before we got far enough with prospective investors. We love the fact that we always had full control of the business and we didn't have to meet the expectations or hit the KPIs or just listen to the opinion of someone whose main concern was whether we would become a unicorn or reach an exit. But in late 2022, I was introduced to somebody doing debt financing for recurring revenue businesses. This is what they call cash flow financing. And this was more flexible and manageable than kind of traditional debt financing, which always had requirements we didn't want to take on. Things like collateral requirements, personal guarantees, ownership requirements, and so on. For the cash flow financing, if we made more money in a certain month, we paid more. If we had a slow month, we paid less. So very flexible and easy to manage with our growth. And so we started with a $100,000 facility at the end of 2022 and have since received $500,000 in total financing. It's not a huge sum at all, but it has allowed us to grow more quickly than we otherwise would have, but not so quickly that we get ahead of ourselves. So it's been more of like a springboard for existing plans and trajectory rather than a runway to try and take off, into the stratosphere. It's given us peace of mind when placing bets on next hires or expenses, and it's also given us the flexibility to take advantage of some unexpected opportunities. Today, and a lot has happened in the last 12 to 18 months. Our team has nearly doubled in size. We continue to hire for new roles. Our customer base has doubled in size. Meanwhile, one of our biggest competitors got acquired by Autodesk. There's the emergence of AI. There are new design tools emerging to threaten the dominance of Revit. The era of near zero interest rates has finally ended and the red hot global economy has started to cool down. So while I wish I could say, and they lived happily ever after, our story is far from over. Today, some of the biggest challenges we face include recruiting and management, institutionalizing knowledge and standardizing processes, keeping the product easy to use, fast and beautiful as it grows in features and functionality, executing faster on our roadmap, staying close to our customers, and staying consistent and creative with our marketing. But we have learned some very valuable lessons along the way that can help us face and tackle today's challenges and those that will surely come in the future. And I want to share 8 quick lessons from our story that I think are relevant to anyone working on a product or service, whether that's in your own company, freelance, or even within a larger company. So the first lesson is that timing may not be everything, but it is important. I think it's very possible to be too early. Sometimes the market isn't there yet, the demand isn't there, or the conditions aren't stable enough. I think that was definitely the case with our first go round as Endecan doing Revit content creation. On the other hand, I think it's hard, like having competitors and even established players is a sign that there's sufficient demand for what you want to offer. Of course, your offering has to be compelling enough to compete, but that's always going to be the case. Lesson number 2 is to solve your own problems. Creating Revit content wasn't a problem that we ourselves had. It was a gap that we saw in the market and tried to fill. On the other hand, we built a content management system to solve a real business problem we had ourselves. And when you set out to solve a problem you've experienced, I think you're likely to be a better judge of what makes for a good solution. You also just care more about it because you felt the pain and frustration directly. So you're more determined and more passionate about the quality and value of what you produce. Lesson number 3 is to build with your customers. I would say customer feedback is worth its weight in gold. I mean, we wouldn't have had a successful start to Kinship if we hadn't piloted it with Bureau Happold first. We wouldn't be able to keep customers the way we have if we didn't develop Kinship based on their feedback. This doesn't mean you just do whatever your customers ask. I don't think that's what it means. It doesn't mean you build features just to meet a particular customer's needs. I think it means you take feedback, you uncover the fundamental needs and goals behind that. You see where there's a lot of good overlap with a lot of customers or with your general vision, and you come up with a solution that fits your product and serves as many people as possible. But the key thing is just to be in touch with the people you're serving, however it makes sense for you to do that, and aim to add more value for them over time. Lesson number 4 is basically don't raise money if you don't need to. Yes, it can be a shortcut to growth, but it usually takes a significant amount of time itself to raise money. It comes with serious strings attached. It chips away at your control of the business, and it can let you temporarily at least ignore the fundamentals of good business, ensuring that you have good cash flow, that you're profitable, that you're sustainable. So if you're a pre-launch company or product, can you find a way to build on the side or using income from a different source? If you're post-launch, can you find a way to grow from your own sales and cash flow? If you're more established, can you find loan financing that's reasonable to service like we did? There are definitely businesses where raising large amounts of outside capital is necessary, but I would say in general, building software that people pay for is not one of those. Lesson number 5, there is no competition. Of course, there's competition, but what I mean here is that you shouldn't focus on what competitors are doing or try to develop your product against theirs. I think it's really important to know what makes your product special, why people buy and enjoy it, and just focus on maximizing that. You can't win every customer as much as I would love to. You can't please everyone, and no product is for everyone. So just kind of know what makes your product what it is, why people value that, and aim to maximize that over time. Lesson number 6 is that you need what you can call a whole product. This concept comes from a book that I love called Crossing the Chasm. And it means that your core technology will only get you so far in a market. In order to really succeed in a market, you also need things that make your product usable by the average person or average company, which are things like customer support, training and implementation resources, integrations or extensions, secondary features that enable installation, configuration, and management. You don't need all of those right away from the beginning. Some may be more important than others, but if you're trying to grow, then it is imperative to think beyond your core product and invest in your whole product. Okay, lesson number 7 is that many small steps are basically better than one big leap. It's much easier and much faster to take one step forward than to make a big jump. Big jumps are risky. You have to put more resources behind them. It takes longer to prepare and execute, and you can land in the wrong place and have to go back or change direction. On the other hand, small steps are easy to execute, generally easy to identify, and you can always adjust and revise your direction as you go. And then last but certainly not least, growing pains are a real and unavoidable part of growing a business. It will bring challenges that are difficult to go through. You will make mistakes, so it's best to accept and even to some extent embrace the pain. I think it's there to teach you something that will help you learn and grow. And there are certain pains like running out of money or customers that you want to avoid, but even those, if you can get through them, I think lead you on to greater things in the future. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope the many highs and lows of our journey at Kinship have shed some light on some good lessons, insights, takeaways that you can apply yourself. And if you have questions or want to talk more, please find me at the event or email me or find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.